Good afternoon, good afternoon, good afternoon. Well, it's Wednesday, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, it's May 29th, and I'm at my school dance studio. Actually, used to work here a few years back, and this is in Sonok, Hungary, where I'm presently residing at. And without further ado, this is my first video episode, number one, of Legends of Club Underground Dancing. As some of you might know me on Facebook, I use the AKA name as Dancer New York City, which is home base, born in Harlem and raised up in the Bronx. And basically, I'm going to put a couple of videos together for learning and educational reasons of club, underground music, dance scene in particular. I gather I should start out my name. My name is Oscar Reyes. As I mentioned earlier, born in Harlem, 112th and Lenox, grew up there for a few years before the family relocated into the Bronx. Um, both parents, mother and father, were born in Central America, Honduras. I gather my father from La Ceiba and my mother from a part that's called Puerto Cortez. This background information is for people that I've been acquainted with for many years through dancing back at home and don't really know much of myself and who I really am. So that's why I'm going into this background history of family and so forth. I would like to also say that my grandfather on my mother's side was one of my first earliest inspirations. Somewhere at the age of 3 or 4, I remember um, that at our house functions, when the family would gather together at different houses and so forth, that as part of the entertainment, my grandfather was like a one-man showman. Um, he played multiple instruments such as piano, six-string guitar, violin, accordion, and himself was a great dancer. And at this early age of 3 and 4, at the house functions, my grandfather, during the time of the gathering, somewhere in the midst of it, would call out for me and put me on top of the kitchen table or whatever table was available, and I would get up and he would ask me to dance for the family. So that was my first early on inspiration as far as dancing went, and um, had a light, vague understanding of the response I was getting from my family members, but I still remember vividly that everybody had a smile on their face and they would right away go into clapping and applauding and what have you. Um, so it was a great re- receiving a response like that and not really knowing that this gift of dance that some and through all parts of the world have it, and some have it more so where it's in the family, as I can say, for my family part for sure, and the blood of our roots and what have you. But in any event, as I got older, I realized that this gift and talent as time went on that I was able to still today use it as one of the greatest blessings as far as connecting with people. And it's been a great journey. I believe as long as my heart is pumping and I'm on my feet and living, I would always dance. It's part of who I am. It's one of the blessings that I'm able to pass on to people, even through the midst of me also in connecting with different dancers in different parts of the world, but also even back home in New York. Um, it's been something that you almost cannot live without. In most cases, for a lot of people who enjoy dancing. So, I would like to start out with this legends of Club Underground Dancing, but actually, like as I'm here, just give some insight and history going back into where um, I first, outside of home, started to get exposed to dancing outside and basically coming up in the Bronx in the late 60s. A lot of house parties, basically. And then with the movement before they had put the label of it called breakdancing, it was like a lot of street dancing going on. Um, I remember early on in my summer day camp, we closed out one summer, and the head of the counselors, a guy by the name of Richard Tanko, was whispering to my ear that they're going to have some sort of a dance marathon. And I was like, okay, dance marathon. He kind of persuaded me to go ahead and, be one of the contestants because of my dancing ability. And this was like the first time I actually danced for several hours back to back. And remember the last song that was played and the last man standing was myself, which was James Brown's Sex Machine. And it was like, enjoyment to receive how all my folks that I was, hanging out with at the summer camps really were thrilled and excited for myself and for me passing on this energy throughout this several hours of dancing. So I started to get, as they say, the taste in receiving this connection where I also knew it was a way of me setting myself free, in a lot of areas. So back then, coming up, and eventually, um, we was actually living up in the Bronx when we relocated from Harlem, and one of the first places we lived close by to actually was on Third Avenue by the Cross Bronx, right across the street from the park there. Um, and our parents put us into Catholic school at the time. It was just me and my oldest living in Myrna, Viola, and my younger brother came about a few years later. But for the first few years of school, I went to a school which was located on Bathgate Avenue, right off of East Tremont. And the name of this Catholic school was called St. Joseph. And St. Joseph was exciting, nice location at the time back in the late '60s in Tremont, uh, multi international. This was the first time me encountering people from parts of Europe, that had with their family migrated for whatever reasons, and it was a lifetime experience, I guess, when you first go to any type of school. Um, but even at the school, they would close out sometimes with different little celebrations and dance functions and so forth. And my sister, which is another um, teacher of mine, besides my mother. She was early on athletically wise involved and into the dance and so forth. So I was like her chaperone. So I ended up going to some of these school dance functions with her, and obviously we've always throughout the years evolved in dancing and opened up different doors and were dance partners at the same time for many years. Um, just like my uncle Sessa on my mother's side and her were dance partners. Um, and what's funny about this also was that where we lived at on Third Avenue, years later, how they say you go into a cycle of a revolving circle, was that one of the great true DJs producers that come out from the Bronx, Watson Projects, Jelly Bean Benitez, actually played in an underground spot called Charlie's there years ago, and it was in the basement, sub basement, or basement for that matter, in the building actually where I used to live back then in the '60s, way before he started playing. But going back into the school functions, that was great. And then, as I got older now, entering into high school, and the high school I went to was up by Meshulla Parkway, one of the best sports schools in all of the Bronx. The name of that school was Deepwood Clinton. Let me just jump back again. After St. Joseph, I transferred over to another school in the South Bronx, or from Melrose, I think 153rd Street, which was called St. Albert's, St. Albert's, and I graduated from that one. Actually, was on the track team and did a lot of functions with that. But at the time, a good friend of mine, like in that seventh or eighth class around there, was starting to get the bug and had the ear of like wanting to do things with music. And um, we knew of different, clubs, sort of say, and they have, in particular back then, late '60s, early '70s, let me say early '70s, mid '70s, which was on Intervale Avenue, which was called a 310. Reason why I'm saying this is before I even got down into Manhattan club scene, I was basically, from the Bronx, grew up. So this 310 was one of the hot spots. I can't remember the DJ's name, but we would go there to listen to this so-called club underground music that obviously wasn't being played on a radio station. Um, Also, at this time, there were different DJs coming about throughout different boroughs. But now, um, going back into the high school, first, second year, I came across some other brothers at the school. It was an all male school, and different guys were doing different things, dancing and, musicians and so forth. Um, and I met a guy, which he goes under the name of Mambo King, named Mario Diaz. And at the time, the hustle was out. And now, between the hustle and obviously back at home, we always played variety of music, but one of the mainstream ones was salsa and so forth. That was a big movement back then in the '70s, and these brother Mario was like, listen, you got to come take a look and see the dance troupe I'm dancing with, which turned out to be the Latin Symbolics, Eddie Torres and the dance crew out. Basically, a lot of them were out from the Bronx, in different backgrounds, in particular of Latin American backgrounds and so forth, whether like Mario himself being Cuban, some Dominicans, and Puerto Ricans, and so forth. This was my first exposure to actually a dance, any type of dance troupe ever back then, which was well known throughout not just New York. He eventually put the name internationally, these Latin symbolic dances. And back then, now, this was the scene that I was hanging out in when I got to Manhattan. Well, actually, in the Bronx, let me go back into the Bronx, they had a couple of clubs popping up. They had something called La Epoca over there by Baychester. And as I'm saying that, I need to dig out some paperwork of a quick write down that I did of a little bit of this club scene back in the Bronx. You had something off by East Tremont, and I just was in contact with one of my old timers from the club days, underground clubs in Manhattan, and heard that Side Street had recently did something. And Side Street was like after hanging out Sunday in Orchard Beach and partying and doing the thing there, then you went in and concluded over at Side Street. Epcot was a really nice spot on Baychester. We also had something over there on East Tremont and Webster Avenue. Little Louie used to play there back in the days. Can't remember the name of it right now. And there was also something in between Kingsbridge, on University Avenue, between Kingsbridge and Fordham Road. So sort of an after hour there. And they had a couple of things up on Fordham Road and further uptown. I'm sure they had several things going on in the South Bronx for sure too. In any event, now as I'm in high school, hanging out with Mario, another guy named Dante, and some other dancers, I just came across another guy just recently named Dal Ramos, or Romero for that correction. And we all were basically hanging out in the upper part of Manhattan or no further down in mid Manhattan. And the main place I was going up to was a place called Barney Google's on 86th Street off from 3rd Avenue. Really nice space there, and they did mainly salsa music, live bands, and so forth and so on. Obviously, Roseland Ballroom was one of the spots that I used to hit. Ipanema, the Cork in the Bottle, and in El Barrio, I used to hit a spot. And it was an after hour called Christopher's that was pretty nice. Oh, also in the Bronx, I think it's still going on. It's Willie's Steakhouse, and up there by that area of Willie's Steakhouse, there was a strip there of that block there. They had several different small little clubs that opened up back in early '80s and so forth. Yeah, these were some of the clubs basically that I started to go to, before really getting into what we all know of and heard of as far as being trailblazers of really getting down into the further downtown, as they say, going down to Lovetown, where now, somewhere in high school, I met a good friend of mine. Um, we call him Charlie, actually Carlos, and got to his house one afternoon, and the guy had a queuing box and was queuing records in, and had acetates, had metal plates. It's like, where you getting this stuff from? Anyway, he had a guy named Jacob that was from the Bronx that was selling a lot of metal plates at the time, and this guy Jacob was hanging out with a lot of DJs downtown in Manhattan, and a guy named Mike that my friend Charlie knew had a membership for some club, and this club supposedly was a gay club called the Loft, and so this was like 1976, and still remember the day of getting down to Dave Mancuso's Loft. Amazingly, we was like misfits, both of me and Charlie, all dressed up like we was going to a Mid Manhattan club. But that experience that evening when we was out on a Saturday night, because that's the only day he did the party at this time, was the ultimate breathtaking journey that opened up a window in the book of life that still 40 something years later still have been blessed and able to pass it on to others. Um, so this is what these different episodes of videos that I'm going to conclude to do with um, Legends of Club Underground Dancing. I first of all would like to say, take a minute of silence for those who have passed on from the underground family, club dancing, in particular the Loft family and Garage family and other clubs for that matter, who have passed on and crossed over. And with that done said, I've been in contact with a lot of the people from back in the days on Facebook, and quote from Bex in the City mentioned one point that we need to try to institutionalize what we have participated to in an era of history, which is now called the house music and the house movement throughout the world. Um, so, in saying that, yeah, I figure with the technology these days, it's just like recently I saw that Red Bull Academy music interviews, one in particular with Tom Moulton and also Leroy Bridges not too long ago. And I totally agree with what their quotes were, that even though we're in an age of technology and you have the advancement that almost anybody can put a recording studio together and what have you, but in all that advancement, you have to put a bigger part of yourself in how you use your technology within the feeling from inside. So going into this music that has been uh, turned on to millions of people, and actually also where it will be continuing in the future, I definitely need to say thank you to David Mancuso. I mean, hundreds of thousands have been touched by this brother. And the great thing that I got from him in particular was not only sound equipment knowledge, acoustically wise, but the fact of the music. Um, the musical journey that he opened up to us was impeccable. The music that I still today know. I haven't been to a Loft reunion party in years, but I'm sure you probably will hear just certain music there and nowhere else. And that was one of the best things that the Loft and still continues to do in their reunion parties. Um, and all the crews that and all timers that go back and help them and stay in touch with them. I mean, that's what it's all about. It's not about me. It's not about you know me, this, that. It's about us. Always about us. You know, in the world of dance that I've always been involved with, and the people, it's about a us thing. Um, and now, this is like 1976, hanging out at the Loft, and uh, just want to say certain things from the time of going to the Loft, and then eventually other clubs opened up. Um, but now, after getting that taste at the Loft, what I need to really say is that you basically would always have a bag, you know, some sort of a bag, and you know, just important basic things about this underground scene. For sure, you always had your baby powder, okay? Um, you know, definitely had to bring out, a change of clothes for sure. 30 something years later, uh, I still wear, famous Chinese slippers. Okay, you can get the ones with the red bottoms. Those are my favorite ones because you can slide easier. And eventually, I went on to these too, but these are the two classic ones here. Okay, um, and we had assortments of pants. I actually most of the pants were usually drawstring type of a pants. You know, easily comfortable. Some people at one point, at one era, they was calling certain pullover pants like this, drawstring pants, werewolf pants. That's for the break dancers. I actually have been in the past trained for different styles of martial arts, so sometimes I would actually bring out my gi pants and what have you. You know, certain changeover, but you definitely a true loft garage dancer would always have a change of clothes. You know, a t-shirt, you know, another shirt, uh, and obviously a towel or bandana, what have you. These are some of the things that you bring out. Just want to say really quick also that you know the law in particular. I need to give some shout outs to some certain dancers there. We got the first guy that always comes to mind, man. It's James. James was one of the inspirations besides Bernard Juice, James Junebug. Um, you know, wherever you at, and I always say this part here, the sister, her name, Sophie Escobar, was one of my inspirations who actually got me to put on some white gloves. So she's the first person I ever seen pull out white gloves on the dance floor, which was I thought really remarkable. So, uh, you know, and obviously maybe bring some water, you know, key elements. In my case, I always bring a knee ace band. You know, there's always water there. That was a great thing back then too about these underground clubs. Basically, the Loft, Garage, even Buttermilk Bottom, several other underground clubs, there wasn't no liquor license. So they basically, you know, you can drink water, or the option was you can buy water. Um, and the other thing was that it was amazing at the Loft that, you know, they had two big bowls or whatever filled in with different fruits and so forth. So throughout the night, you could boost yourself up with different fruits and what have you. And even early in the morning, they always had some coffee serving out. So that was a great thing about these underground clubs, which nowadays I kind of really miss because a lot of the venues, you know, as the 80s came in, have changed where you got the bar setting, and most of the places you go to, I'm sure these days are with a bar. So that wasn't a part of the underground's, you know, club days back in the late 70s, and the early part of the 80s. And going back to giving out shout outs, um, you know, we have, well, they got Check Your Body at the Door, Archie Archie Burnett, a couple other guys from there, Conrad, um, oh, the sister, man. I haven't caught her on Facebook or nothing like that, but this sister that was really an outstanding dancer. The Coco from the Loft, because they got a couple of Coco's sisters throughout these different clubs. But the in particular Coco I'm talking about was the first and only original one that I met at this time back in the late 70s, was at the Loft, and she was, you know, always danced a lot with Bernard Juice and James Bug and Sophie. You know, I kind of got into their area of dancing with them too. Um, Mike, Fast Feet Mike, let's see, Louis Luce, Garcia, my brother, Luis Garcia, that's even pulled out. I know few of us came out, and it was great to see James when they did the call out for some dancers that dance at the Loft and Garage to come out to get recorded to do some clippings for that Maestro film. And sadly, they didn't put it in the main feature of the film. We was in certain little clips of it at the beginning and the talking part at the end. But it was great to see that, you know, for the love that we had for this music. Even Chino 3 came out too there. I just remember him that he popped out, and a couple of other sisters that were there too. Um, basically, come out and support the love of dance. So, with that said, yeah, these are some of the things that I just mentioned that you should definitely always backpack, change your clothes. That's like an unwritten law. And baby powder, you know, any loft. or garage dancer or party goer really would have stuff like this when they go out. So, um, hung out at the loft to about from 76 to like about 70, 77. And in 77, at that time, the gallery was going on right up the block. I was hanging at the loft at Mercer and Prince. You actually, not too many people mention Mercer Street, but you entered, most of the time I entered in on the Prince one that was located there. I would enter in through Mercer. You would go down the stairs and come out. And then if you came out, the doors that opened up on the side street was Prince. And then right down the block on Houston and Mercer, the corner, right off the corner, that's where Nicky Siano was there with his gallery. Um, and eventually, David went on with the loft, moved it down to Third Street. I didn't really continue to go on because at this stage in my life, in 77, actually got an invite at the loft to go to some party that was happening. That's Labor Day weekend, which is in September of 77, was when we got this invite to go to some place called the Garage. Prior to that, the history that I known on it was that um, the owner, one of the main owners, Mike Brody, was hanging at a spot called Reed Street and came across Larry at the time and proposed to him to see if they can get together and jointly work on this dream that Michael had. And Mel Sherrin at the time, being involved with Michael and working with record label, was one of the partners financially that helped make this dream get off the floor and come true with Michael and other whatever people that were involved back then. So upon getting this invitation for the Labor Day weekend to actually go to this garage, ended up being on King Street, nice name, huh? 84 King Street, and it was rat, as they say, like a rat hole. Uh, I mean, it was one room. Uh, I guess they was doing some sort of construction, building stuff, what have you, whatever. And back then in '77 to somewhere, I think the grand opening was in '79 of the official Paradise Garage, but um, ended up getting there in 1977, and somewhere going into the beginning of '78, was knowing some people that were dealing as far as the staff goes that they was trying to organize and put together. A guy named Dennis, who was the manager at the time, he lived up in the Bronx, and I had a good friend of mine at the time named Gathan Waters. Actually, was the one that proposed. We was working at the Wall Street Journal and mentioned to me as far as trying to get work and assist in the courtroom. And this is 1978. Ended up working in the courtroom a couple months while I was there, about 3, 4 months. Michael asked me if I would like to manage it. I ended up managing the courtroom from '78 to short period, '78 to '79. Um, but upon in the midst of all that, this was the garage at the point of doing this, what was considered a construction, under construction parties, and which ended up being the glass crystal ball, whatever fountain room was the original room back then, just that one room, and a lot of sawdust. It was, like I said, it's a mess there for the first few, months or a year and a half or so. And moving along, quick short story was that there was, a lot of things going on. The staff was starting to fall into place. Um, Nathan. They had a guy in the kitchen named Nathan, and then that's where I actually knew more or less would see David DePino at the time hanging out in the kitchen. I don't know if he was assistant or working there before him and Larry got close, but at the time when Kenny Eubanks was one of the workers there too in the kitchen. He's up in the heavens now too. Anyway, um, can't remember the rest of the names, but obviously Noel was there and so forth at the door. Um, can't remember MG. I guess MG working electricity or lights, something like that. Another name that pops up from the staff. Rico, actually Rico was at the gallery, and then now he's upstate New York. Steve Perez for sure. We've been in contact. So a lot of the old timers of this original staff, we've kept in touch. At the time, Joey Lanos was working security. Before him, they had another guy named Paul. Some of the names just to mention. But in any event, now working at the garage and my opportunity of managing the cold room, which was a great thing. That Michael being open as he was always open for different ideas, and I realized the backpacks, the changing of the clothes, and everything else. And at this point, at the cold room, there wasn't. It was just all open. I had like a countertop, but it was all open. So like I'm looking at all the space going up, and like Mike, is there any way possibly with the carpenters to design actually cubic, space where the bags can go in and slots for umbrellas? He was like, well, suggestion sounds good. We always had the staff meetings as a construction of the club being built, and the next thing I know, came in 1 week and the shelves were being done, inside the back with the space to go up, and the idea was implemented and put to use. So I guess in my own set of mind way that not physically did the building, but was able to share good input on designing of added addition to the courtroom. Seen a lot of people come in and out. So moving fast forward into '79, actually, I was did the work from '78 to '79. We had the grand opening finally of the Paradise Garage, and that was somewhere in November, going right into before the new year of 1980. And upon that going on, what took place was that this moment that everything that took place, it was well done, and we worked the people. We actually, for New Year's of 1979, um, we had to close down the courtroom because we had hung up over 3,000 coats, and there wasn't no more space in the courtroom. And actually, the person you see walking by now is the owner of this place, and her name is Tunde. See you, Tunde. Okay, and so it was really a great time, and that then when I had to close down the courtroom was incredible. You know, bringing in the '79 New Year, there was, I believe, definitely over 3,500 people in the club. Uh, One of the best performances that stayed to my mind to today would have to be First Choice, and they also started to do a record pool party thing during the middle of the week. I mean, actually, when going back to the Loft days, David Mancuso was doing that because he improvised with Judy Weinstein, and they opened up for the record pool, which was the first record pool. And going back to the garage at this point, '79, I somewhere going into the end of '79, I discontinued my services with them, and somewhere around 1980, '81, I was still hanging out. You know, had a good time. Somewhere between '81, '82, not so many people speak on this behalf, was that there was just one type of membership early on, and somewhere between '82, '83, all of a sudden it was changed. Got a little bit more commercial, obviously. Fees had to be paid out. Um, there was a movement going on, and staff talking and everything else. I wasn't part of staff at this time, but as one of the main people that hung out as far as dances go on, that the garage was trying to separate, so to say, the crowd of having straight crowd one night and gay crowd both nights, and they actually I don't know, Oscar Fuller mentioned it. I know Mike Stone was around with a petition, but a lot of the Latinos and African Americans, which was predominantly um, the main folks going to this garage at this time, and probably did a lot to making this club financially wise throughout the years, started to have a petition going around. And the petition was in regards to separating, you know, gay or straight night for that matter, or I don't want to say it was a white black thing, but it was more of a gay straight night. And this is when the idea came out of a core, CORE, core membership card, and a little bit more money, but you basically can come any night, and you basically had, the Friday night crowd. And at this time, they was catering to a lot of university students, and I guess financially it was a big help. So, you know, business you got to do certain things, but that separation of trying to do the gay straight night type of thing wasn't the best move at the time, and the petition went on, and I guess Michael, what have you, on that idea, dropped that idea. But somewhere in going into '83, I myself discontinued really going on a regular. It got really commercial at that point, so like '83, '84, I basically wasn't going. And prior to the petition getting signed off on us, there was a split up on the staff, and Dennis, the manager, I got let go, and there was a big commotion going on with that. And actually, long little short story version, at the time, I was just going in hanging out regularly on a VIP membership card at that point, and I get a flyer from Evelyn Santos coming to count the bathroom. I know Evelyn's gonna probably laugh on this story, but ended up the next thing I know, 5 minutes behind that, Paul, who was one of the main security guys, is telling me with another security guy that Michael wants to see me in his office. It's early in the morning. I go to the office, escorted by Paul and them. We got some bad news about this flyer thing. And what had happened was that Dennis and some other people were giving out the flyers of this party that he was going to be doing at the Electric Circus. Anyways, long story short, I got what is called 86 in the garage. Could you imagine this, right? So I got 86. 6 months went on, and I was like, my partner at the time was Barbara Jean Kutch Reynolds, originally from Baltimore, but I met her in the gallery. Anyway, she was like friction going on between us because to the point that I couldn't go hang out no more. They wasn't allowing me to get in. Somewhere after 6 months, put the pride down, and it was like, listen, speak to Michael, see what you can do. So eventually called him, and we spoke on it, and just face to face talking like, how could you really, you know, whatever happened, happened. This is wise. I really wasn't handing out no flyers. I just happened to get a flyer from Evelyn at this point. And long story short, listen, as far as giving a good, positive atmosphere and on the dance floor and so forth, been doing that, you know, before working here and after. So anyway, we came to an agreement that now I can get a core membership and I would have to pay for it. And that was it with that story. And like I said, by '83, '84, I really wasn't going on that much there. Um, I forgot to mention this also, that a major part besides bringing your bag and your change of clothes, number one thing, you got to go in there with an open, positive soul, spirit, mind before you get to these locations that you did back then and even today. Um, you know, the other day I was hanging out in Vienna. Actually, first time got to meet John Morales. Was there last year. I went in to celebrate my birthday. Connected with some guys that they do something. They got a page on Facebook called We Meet Disco, and uh, you know, when you meet characters of such and seeing John, especially, you know, born raised in the Bronx, so that was a great connection. And we could talk a lot about certain areas and so forth, but really humble brother. And that played the key part in my whole livelihood, you know, on as I talk in this video and on into the future. I've always kept a humble spirit, you know. It's not about my accomplishments or you know what I have, what I don't have, but just keeping a humble spirit, which in early on as I trained in the martial arts, which was a key point, key fact I should say, and being always humble. And the other one, you know, even through the dancing and being able to awaken different souls in the movements that you can do of how you move people, you know, and that connection with other dancers and so forth, or non-dancers for that matter, that are there partying. Um, a really good part for me was like 1979. Never forget, this is early on, way before Boy Jarvis had put together visual and his, you know, engineering and music career. I met him, Boy Jarvis, Mario Grant, and a guy named Vinny. I forgot Vinny's last name, but they was having some dance audition. This is the second time my dance partner at the time that was on my back to do this audition. Her name was Barbara Bostic and lived up in the Bronx. I really like, how we saying, streetwise, but business sister too. And you know, called me up the second time, you know, to tell me this is the date, blah blah blah. Next thing I know, we end up at just stage to do this audition. And at this audition, David Padilla was there, you know, from El Barrio, the hustle brother, and obviously with the House of Extravaganza. And he had his dance partner there, and we did the audition. And me, myself, and Barbara, and David and his partner, we went on to do the finals on XYWPIX Channel 11, and at the time Jerry Blesko was the host of Solar Live, and this was the first time for me actually doing anything on a television level, national TV. Um, and when I got there, me and my partner, you know, we went as representing the garage. At that same time, the garage grand opening had just recently taken place, so um, we had a great time. We ended up taking second place, and even going back into club that following weekend and stuff like that. It wasn't about me that or her that we did, you know. It was about us, you know, representing the family of the garage and what have people have done for my dancing experience and just music and I mean, so many great things have come out both places. Dave Morales even mentioned it one time as a quote was that, you know, the university was the loft, the institution was the garage. And I mean, a lot of people at this present day have been able to blossom from what they learned through both places. Um, Myself, I mean, there was a brother I truly miss. I haven't caught him on Facebook. I haven't heard from him in a while from Brooklyn. Brother's name was Ralph Siegel, and there was little groups of people from different boroughs. I had to say this though, going back to the loft at the time when I first started hanging out, I really didn't know too many Bronx people, but the few that were there and ended up connecting with, which was Dion and his brothers and some other people there, Izzy. And actually, we ended up hanging out at a spot called Zanzibar's, which was really nice. We also was going to another spot. Me, Dion, and Izzy was working at this place called the Cheetah in Patterson, New Jersey. And then talking about New Jersey, obviously at the time, I don't know if he was underage at the point when he was hanging out, but I know he was younger. Was Naheem Johnson. We're very close friends, and to today, I regularly keep in contact with Boyd. We've throughout the years of him being one of the judges at this Justine's for the Soul Life finals. He was one of the judges, and we laughed about it the other day when I mentioned to him that that's how I met him before he was even coming out to the garage and so forth. And Oscar Fuller is one of the other brothers I regularly keep in contact with, good friends. Randy Flood, definitely Willie Wall. You know, I used to help them out with their printing stuff out there in Panorama in Brooklyn. Just reconnected with one of the longtime fellows from their hangout too, named Cosmic. The Reggae Lounge was one of the spots where I used to hit regularly. And then, you know, Nikki went on to play at the Bottom and Bottoms later on, and Oscar Fuller, that's where I connected with him there. But all this to say that times have changed, and obviously there's always going to be change. That's constant, and you know, it's like I just heard about this Loft reunion, and I was just writing on the Facebook that it's amazing that, you know, both different venues going on, and you got the Loft reunion, then you had the Body and Soul. Yeah, back in the earlier days, I don't know if they worked it out in the better communication or something like that, but it's when I see the different functions that are going on back at home in New York, it's like kind of chaotic. There's so many things, so many ones to choose from. You can't be in four places at one time, but all in all, I guess that's just the involvement of the change, the technology, and so forth and so on, and different people doing different things with music. So many places to go to these days. Um, all in all, I don't know if there's anything else I want to add in to this episode one. I know I'm going to end up in a few continue. Oh, and I just need to mention also that I had the great opportunity to work at Club 12 West as one of the premier dancers back on Nicky Siano's comeback. Um, that was a good time there because actually that's when somewhere around then, um, 2004, six, somewhere around there, I know Mel Sherman finished up his book about the garage and so forth. And he had the book signature right in there and opening up the celebration for that. Um, One of the last things I did back in 2009, I can't remember the guy's name, but another brother had put together this House Dance International when he was first pick up and going. And in 2009, I was home visiting and had the opportunity to be one of the guest legendary dancers for that. Back here where I'm at in this town of Sonok, actually in 2011 they had their first Zumba day. So not being a certified Zumba dancer, but as I say, as a dancer as we are, and I consider, you know, and the dances I came around with, we danced a little bit of everything. It's not just one particular style. And that was the great thing behind that. And then mentioning that, I need to say also Denise and Mary from Staten Island. Been around for many years. It was good to see her out there and a lot of other people at the dance parade when I saw the video. Obviously, Evelyn Santos. And the last time I was at home rather, in 2009, ran across Evelyn at that down there by the South Street Seaport function, and it was so great, man, that afterwards we ended up, you know, me and my friend, her friend, and just all timers, man, had breakfast together.